Okay, you guys, last video of the night. This one, so we had one video already on 1.3 freshwater ecosystems, aquatic biomes. So now I'm going to do one on marine meaning saltwater. So let's see, let's go ahead and get started. So most of the planet is covered in salt water, and there's lots of biomes found within our ocean. We're going to divide this into a couple of different categories. Remember that marine means salt water. So the first one we want to talk about is the intertidal zone. In the intertidal zone, NPP is very high. We see lots of light. It is photic and high amounts of biodiversity. There's a couple of different types of intertidal zones. For example, coral reefs or kelp forests are examples of intertidal zones. Then we have the coastal region. This is kind of the same as like the littoral zones. These are areas where they may see really high tides, really low tides, so biodiversity can really be very wide. Then the euphotic zone is photic, meaning that it goes down as far as light can penetrate. We don't really see a lot of things here other than phytobacteria or phytoplankton, zooplankton, those areas, things that have lots and lots and lots of tiny little things. The middle part of the ocean is called the bathyal zone. There's not a lot of light here, and so NPP is very low. There's a lot of low biodiversity here. But then the abysmal zone is completely dark. Think about the Finding Nemo, right? So we see organisms that can make their own light, like that anglerfish. There's not NPP can be high depending on the region, but it doesn't come from light. It comes from these sulfur vents, and so we see these communities living in the abyssal zone that have huge biodiversity, but they're small and localized in specific areas where those vents are. So this is a euphotic is photic zone, and then this is aphotic, no light. Other areas that we could talk about are estuaries. These are very similar to some wetlands. These are some of the most biodiverse areas on land. An estuary is specifically where saltwater and freshwater are going to come together. We see that they have huge NPP, and therefore they have high biodiversity. You may hear us refer to this as brackish water. This includes things like mangrove forests, which are found off the coast of Florida. They're adapted to living in salt water, and they naturally do a desalinization process where they remove the salts. They have their own specific succession. And ask me, I'll show you some pictures in class. My husband and I went there a couple of years ago, and it was so cool. You can see actually the tree roots coming out, but they're found on these they form these islands around the coast of Florida that meant to protect the coast of Florida. And so here you can see in the picture, you can see their roots kind of coming out, and it's illegal for anybody to pluck them out of the water. So when one kind of gets established and then more get established, the Florida Keys are really known for having these mangrove forests, and they start with mangrove trees, and then sand comes in and silt, and then these large islands are deposited. The intertidal zone, like I was talking about, is the area between the coastline. High biodiversity here. It's very steep and rocky, but we see high amounts of biodiversity, specifically these sea stars. Sometimes kelp forests are classified as intertidal zones. They have a keystone species called the sea otter that we'll talk about later on in the semester, but they're very specialized here, but biodiversity can be very high. Coral reefs are another area where we see huge amounts of biodiversity. Corals are actually animals. They're in the photic zone. Most biodiversity is found in the ocean, is found in the coral reefs. And so what we see is that the coral is an animal. It has a polyp in which the algae lives in the polyp, and like this bacteria types it. So the animal creates the shelter, and then the polyp of algae lives within the shelter. The algae gives the coral food, the coral gives the algae space, and so we see that it's a type of symbiotic relationship. During the night, the coral may kind of catch drifting down pieces of dead decomposing things and gain nutrients that way. Huge amounts of NPP, huge biodiversity, heavily threatened by humans. Okay, so again, a lot of this has to do with light availability. Remember, we watched that video in class, and as you go down, the light begins to change colors. And really, things that are blue or green can be seen, but things that are other colored turn black. Remember that the red video or the red marker cap turned black, and that's why we see that a lot of organisms are red and brightly colored because they almost blend in and are black with the rest of the ocean. Um, Water depth and water pressure. As you move further down, pressure increases, temperature goes down, DO, or the amount of oxygen, goes down, salinity, how much salt there is, goes up. Nutrients are found along the coastline and at the very bottom, but not really in the middle. All right, I think you can review the two things about freshwater ecosystems in my other video, but the really important thing to remember is that estuaries and wetlands are some of the most productive areas of aquatic biomes. And I hope that's it. I think that's it. I hope this was helpful.